Good evening. Please bear with me while I read a required message. Please note this meeting is being recorded and will be available shortly hereafter for scheduled and on-demand viewing on any smartphone or tablet device. If anybody else would like to record the meeting, please contact the town in advance for permission to do so pursuant to Governor Healy's March 29, 2023 signing of the Acts of 2023, extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law until March 31, 2025. This meeting of the Chatham Summer Residents Advisory Committee is being conducted in person and via remote participation via the following Teams link. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may do so by calling the phone number 508-945-4410, conference ID 966-891-822#, or join the meeting online via Microsoft Teams through the link in the posted agenda. Thank you for bearing with me on that. Okay, welcome to the 77th Summertown meeting hosted by the Summer Residents Advisory Committee, SRAC for short. I'm Jamie Meehan, chair of Summer Residents Advisory Committee. We're excited to show you what we've been working on and also some of the positions on certain town issues that we've taken. Before I get into that, we would like to thank the town, especially town manager Jill Goldsmith, for giving SRAC all the access to their talented staff. We particularly want to recognize two town resources that have helped this committee profoundly over the years. Dr. Bob Duncanson, Director of Natural Resources. I don't think he's with us tonight. He's recently retired, so I don't blame him for not being here. And also Alex Halela, who's the town finance director, and I know Alex is here, and she'll be retiring soon. Our committee is appointed by the Select Board. Our mission is to give Summer residents a voice, give the Select Board the benefit of information and views, give fresh outlooks to the town, and take a position and make a case for or against town matters. Everything we think, say, or do is consistent with that mission statement. And this mission statement is conveniently affixed to the back of our nameplate. So we're always aware of that mission statement and what we're trying to do. SRAC passionately looks at a select set of issues, then intently understands the issues and applies a unique skill set in carrying out its mission. We're volunteers and don't vote, just like the rest of the Summer residents. But we did give ourselves a 5% cost of living raise. But the accountants on this committee quickly reminded me that 5% of 0 is 0. So let's meet this Summer Residents Advisory Committee. And Mark, if you could pull up the first slide for me. Okay. Well, I don't see that slide being advanced, but we'll just oh, there we go. Okay. All right, so if I could have the members just give a wave and a nod, and we'll start at the bottom. Mike Waters from New York City. Joel Rotner, West Hartford, Connecticut. Phil Richardson, Tiburon, California. I don't believe Phil is here. Ron Manderscheid, Potomac, Maryland. Ron is not here also. Stuart Green, Chestnut Hill, Massachusetts. Tom Garvey, Dallas, Texas. Roger Donald, Naples, Florida. Roger's not here. Jeannie Allen, Bethesda, Maryland. Jeff Spalter, Secretary, Longboat Key, Florida. Robin Laporcio, Treasurer, Andover, Maryland. Tina Mead, Vice Chair, Washington, D.C. And I'm Jamie Meehan from Parkland, Florida. Okay. All right, so this is the schedule of what we've accomplished so far, and we start in mid-June with a planning meeting and also a review of what was discussed at the annual town meeting in May. And then we meet every Friday during June, July, and half of August. Our first meeting, we heard from the select board chair and the town manager. They made presentations. And then the following week, the town finance committee chair and finance director made presentations. Then Dr. Bob presented water and sewer infrastructure issues. We heard from Police Chief Anderson. And we heard about all things Chatham real estate from Doug Gratton. And we heard from Tim Wood, the publisher of the Chronicle. And last week, we heard from the town's Energy and Climate Change Committee. And we have two more meetings scheduled in August. So we've been busy. We dive into not everything, but a select number of issues. And like I said before, we review these issues intently and hopefully do some good work as far as bringing the issues to the attention of the Summer residents and the select board. Okay. The format of tonight's meeting is that we will hear about the state of the town, affordable and attainable housing initiatives, irrigation issues, communications, and finance. And then SRAC will ask a handful of prearranged questions. We'll hear questions from the audience, either from pre-submitted note cards, and I was told that you haven't taken us up on the note cards. They're in the back outside, so if you want to jot down questions, you're welcome to. Otherwise, you can just ask from the floor. It's fine. And then we'll hear questions from the virtual audience. And if we don't get to your questions, please consider the other ways to engage with SRAC that we'll go over at a later point. We have this room reserved until 9 p.m. So the Red Sox should just about be done finishing up with Kansas City and their victory. They start at 7. So let's try to stick to that time frame. To kick off the meeting, I'd like to welcome Select Board Corey Metters to make a few remarks. Corey.
Good evening, everyone. Oh. Odd feeling on this side of the dais. First of all, for the record, my name is Corey Metters. I'm the current chair of the Select Board. And I want to take a moment to introduce the rest of my select board members who are sitting in the back. We have Vice Chair Mike Schell, Jeffrey Dykins, Shereen Davis, and Dean DeCastro. Collectively, we are your select board members. We serve the entire community, residents, non-residents, visitors. We welcome input from all. We cannot do this alone. And with many sets of eyes, we collect the input and suggestions and criticisms and comments that build our plans and goals and workload, basically. We have a tremendous resource with our volunteers. We have both regulatory and advisory committees in this town. And if you've paid any attention to the memberships of these memberships, we have a great source of resources, individuals that are willing to give their time and energy to help the community, whether it be simply for the parade committee to help in the annual parade, or from one of our regulatory committees. So I give great thanks to all the volunteers who have spent numerous hours serving the town at, not even a 5% increase. Is this a typical year? Certainly not a typical year as far as the staffing goes. We have a tremendous amount of new faces that have joined Team Chatham. We have, people who have stepped down, and we've brought in new faces. We've done some restructuring, and we're going to have some big retirements, as mentioned earlier. Dr. Bob Duncanson, he has just a couple of days ago officially retired. Those are going to be very big shoes to fill. Our finance director, Alex Halela, later this fall, she will be retiring. Another very big shoes to fill. We will do everything in our power to do so, but it's that institutional knowledge that's really hard to really, completely fill, but we will do our best. I do want to, when we talk about institutional knowledge and stability, I do want to take a moment to share my thanks for both our fire department and police department chiefs. Fire department chief Tavano and police chief Mike Anderson have worked up the ranks, and they have collectively, they serve as chiefs of both of our, resources, and the community output and the face that they put out and the efforts they put out, I'm more than appreciative and very proud to see them represent the community in the manner that they have done and they continue to do in their roles. A little side note, the police department this summer, I don't know if you've been downtown at all, we see 4 little summer, they're called community service officers, I believe is the correct term. They wear their yellow shirts. They've been walking up and down Main Street countless times, up and down every single day. It's been a good program. So I would welcome any input from those who have seen anything this summer. Everything I've seen so far and I've experienced has been very positive, and I think this is the one other resource that we've offered the community to take steps in helping the summer volume, help with visitors, help with resources. It's well beyond just parking tickets. It's being a real resource to the community. We have a tremendous amount of projects. Chatham has a lot on our plate. Always has, certainly probably always will. Just to rattle off a short list of projects that we have on our plate and where we will continue to work on, we've got the transfer station. We've got the library, the Kroll Road intersection, airport, waterfront issues, Fish Pier, 90 Bridge Street, Upweller, Trap Dock. Definitely priorities, water, wastewater. Without those 2 items, I mean, that's the foundation of everything else. We have to make those a priority. Housing, our housing initiatives. We've taken great steps over the last couple of years. Queued up right now, we have the Main Street property, referred to as the Buckley property. We have the 137 property, which is recently purchased from the church. We have Old Harbor Road. We have Stepping Stone. We are making great steps forward into the well-acknowledged need for housing, affordable, attainable housing, workforce housing. We all know it needs to be done. There is a variety of opinions on how exactly we approach that, but we have the ball rolling and we are making great strides. And I'm very happy with the team that we have put together, and I think the goals will be met in a relatively respectable amount of time. If anyone hasn't heard, we have a special town meeting in September 18th. Center for Active Living, formerly referred to as the COA. The property at 1610 Main Street will be the prime spotlight topic agenda item for our town meeting. We'll be closing the warrant shortly, so there will probably be a couple of small items, but the main eventer will be the vote on 1610 Main Street. And, that old cliche, everyone come, show up, show your support, vote, every vote counts. Literally, every vote counts. So we'll see. Hopefully we're successful in moving that project forward and see what we can do. So basically, we're going to deal with changes. We have staff changes, we have climate changes, we have economic changes, housing changes. Even our beloved Channel 18, we just found out recently, we're going to become Channel 8 shortly. So we're going to have to rebrand all that. But at the end of the day, our Team Chatham, very proud of them. We have a lot of work to do. We will continue to do our work, and we welcome input from all facets, residents, summer residents, et cetera, visitors. Without that input, we can't do our job. So I thank you very much for your time this evening, and I look forward to the rest of the presentation.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jill Goldsmith, your town manager, and my partner tonight, as has been for the last 11 years since I've been here, is Alex Halela, our finance director. So tonight's state of the town is presented with a lot of input tonight, not just from the residents, our boards and commissions, but who we affectionately call as Team Chatham. And they're with us tonight. These are our department leadership, our department managers, and the folks who get things done in town. So they're kind of over there in the corner. During the question and answer period, we'll certainly bring them up to answer any questions, even the pre-programmed questions. And we have a couple also participating online, so through our hybrid meeting process. So Alex, if we want to get going. I'll switch spots.
Oh, okay.
We're tap dancing here. Okay. So I thought it would be an important reminder, since we've had some changeover with, namely, we have more residents, full-time residents, than we had last year at this time. And it's interesting, before the summer residents were back in about 5 or 6 years ago, 62% of our population, and now it's about 55%. So we saw during COVID that more people who had second homes actually stayed here, some early retirements, and we're just really excited to have those people join us and participate on our boards and committees, as our select board chair, Corey, had just mentioned. So what you have before you is a mission statement naming our form of government, which is open town meeting. We're a full-service charter community. And the select board and town manager work together, although the select board are elected and they are the policy-making board, and through me as the town manager, me and the staff are effectuating policy, putting the projects together and bringing it to the select board for their policy discussion and policy decisions. So here's a modified view of our org charts. We have org charts for every department, including a town-wide organizational chart that's available in our budget documents, and we'll certainly give you those links as we move through the presentation. I promised myself I would time myself, so I'm just going to start my timer, so when you hear it go off, we'll just start talking very quickly. What do you think? Here we go. So what you see before you are value statements from they were approved by the select board back in 2012, and each year there's a process that we go through in the fall. We'll review the community value statements, and through that process, it's sort of the foundation for how we build our budget, because a budget requires priorities, and having these established value statements are an important factor for us, especially as the town manager. So I think they look similar to what you've seen before in the past. The newest one is item J, that's protect and enhance public health and safety of our town, of the town. So throughout the various value statements, it's basically good government and best practices. And again, we then go a little further down the road to our goal-setting process. So the select board established goal categories also back in about 2012. And these are reviewed usually in the fall. And the categories as you see before you are financial infrastructure, social infrastructure, which is one of our newer categories, intergovernmental review and of town staff and boards, environmental and historic quality of the town, long-term planning, legal and communication and intergovernmental relations. And all of this is available on the town's website. So this is sort of a financial state of the town. Alex, if you want to do this, and I'll switch with you. Thank you.
Switching off. So yes, the 2023 State of the Town, again, the budget starts with the Budget Summit and looks at priorities. We look back 2 years and look forward 2 years, as well as planning the upcoming budget. So the FY 2024 budget began on October 25th, 2022. The FY 25 budget will be held on October 17th, where Jill and I will present the FY 2025 budget kickoff. So that will be one of my last official tasks here for Town of Chatham. Select Board then votes the value statements and the goals and objectives, usually in December. And then the capital improvement program and prioritization meetings, again, very important for us to set those priorities, for the Select Board to set those priorities, and that's part of the budget review process. The FY 2024 operating and capital budgets were submitted to both to Jill and myself, and then we review those and submit to the Select Board and the Finance Committee for review, and that happens January through April. So the budget's presented in the beginning of January and then reviewed up until really April, right before town meeting. And then the annual town meeting was held on May 6, 2023. And we were happy to note that we went out for our bond rating again to issue bonds of $7.45 million. And our AAA bond rating was reaffirmed by Standard & Poor's for, I think, well, for as long as we've been here. So very pleased that we're keeping our bond rating. And those are available on the website as well. Standard & Poor's review is listed in Budget Central on the town's website. So the community initiatives, social infrastructure, again, some of the items that we're investing in, the Chatham Elementary School, the town investment. The town did increase the local rooms tax from 4% to 6%, with 1% being dedicated to fund the Chatham Elementary School to keep our elementary school viable here in town, and the other 1% to go for attainable workforce housing. The Dr. Florence Selden Preschool Family Support Program, $425,000. Again, looking at the whole community to keep young families here and initiatives for social infrastructure. The Child Care Voucher Program, $100,000, and that has been a very successful program over the years and is fully utilized. As was mentioned earlier, the Center for Active Living at 1610 Main Street is a topic for the special town meeting coming up on September 18th. And we will have 2 community forums, the first on August 22nd and on September 12th. So very important if you want to listen about the Center for Active Living in advance of the special town meeting September 18th. And then some of our housing initiatives. We've had state legislation where we've petitioned the state legislature for certain items to move housing initiatives forward. Again, as the Select Board Chair mentioned, the property acquisitions on Main Street and Meeting House Road, as well as stepping stones and the potential for 193 Stony Hill, where the current Council on Aging or Center for Active Living is housed. So if 1610 does pass, then we would look at repurposing that building for affordable and/or attainable housing. Financial outlook. Pleased to report again that we are very financially healthy. The town has a very strong financial outlook moving forward. Our revenues, and these are updated for FY 2023, so we had strong collections of local receipts, taxes, as well as grants. Our short-term rental tax collected almost, just over $1.7 million versus 1.6 last year. Again, we just mentioned the designation of the additional 2% hotel motel for the elementary school and for housing. Our traditional lodging tax collected 2.3 versus 2.1 last year, so those are increases. And this is all just based on the 4%, not with the increase in the percentage. So those were based on 4%. The meals tax was up about $100,000 over FY 2022. And then we did receive, I'm not sure if everyone's aware, but we do have an intermunicipal agreement, or an IMA, with the town of Harwich to utilize the wastewater treatment plant. And with that agreement, we have some milestone payments, and then we have operating costs as well. So the IMA funds that we've received from Harwich since we signed that agreement, $6.2 million, which are now segregated into a wastewater capital stabilization fund to help pay for some of those wastewater improvements, so we don't have to go out and borrow for all those costs. The expenditures, the operating budget for FY 2024 shows a 7.63% increase. That is listed, the reasons for that is listed in the warrant, very detailed. We did have contractual increases as well as inflation and some new positions, particularly 2 licensed social workers, 1 for adults and 1 for youth to help here in town. Our reserves we have strong reserves in compliance with the financial policies, and that's also something that Standard & Poor's notes in their bond rating when we go out for those reviews. The FY 2024 capital budget was $3,674,000, funded through available funds, so no impact on the tax rate, and that's in accordance with our financial policies being 9% of the operating budget. And then the town's valuation, which I know that the scorecard will talk about the town's valuation later, but right now we are estimating an increase of 15% in the valuation of the town overall, and that usually relates to a lower tax rate. As the value goes up, that will flatten out the tax rate moving forward. Okay, I know we've talked about this several times, but again, we're very proud of our AAA bond rating, because that way we can borrow money at a lower cost. So it's the highest bond rating for municipalities, and again, it's notes the safest possible investment to lenders, and it's more competitive interest rates. We issued general obligations bonds in May, $7,455,000 for the wastewater, stormwater, and water projects. And the true interest cost, so the interest costs for those were 3.4227%. When we go out and look at our bond issuances, we always have a 5% interest built in. So when we present these to the public, we say we're estimating 5% interest rates. So this came in at 3.4. And then again, our conservative budgeting, COVID financial recovery plan, cybersecurity, and coastal resiliency planning efforts were mentioned by S&P as one of the reasons for sustaining the AAA bond rating. Our capital improvements and plan projects. We started a number of years ago to identify all capital projects and capital plans in our overall capital planning, regardless of the cost. So we have all projects, regardless of the cost and funding source. So CPA, the Community Preservation Act projects, Chapter 90, water, as well as those projects which might be funded through debt, are for the next 5 years are about $49 million. That seems like a lot of money, but again, that will not all hit the tax rate. Other different funding sources. The capital definition is the project must be greater than $10,000 in cost and have a life expectancy of greater than 5 years. So in other words, must be eligible to be have debt issued for it, even though we won't be issuing debt for everything. We look at the select board prioritization meetings for ways to prioritize the projects. And then again, the capital budget must fall within 9% of the operating budget per the financial policies. And then we do segregate certain capital projects that are over a certain amount out of the capital budget, and they are voted on separately on the town meeting warrant. The wastewater project update was given by Dr. Bob on July 25th, and we have a link to that here. It was very informative and talks about everything wastewater. So we have that in our pockets while, and we can refer back to that. Coastal resiliency and access. Coastal resiliency is something that Standard & Poor's had asked us about a number of years ago, and we're always pleased to report that we're very proactive with our coastal resiliency. We have a dredging grant for $500,000 for Stage Harbor and Bridge Street. And then annually, the town appropriates usually $400,000 in capital funds as an annual town appropriation to make sure we have enough money for dredging. We received a $1 million Seaport Economic Council grant for 90 Bridge Street project, so we'll be moving forward with that. Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness, or the MVP grants, we've received just under $500,000 for 2 separate climate adaptation action plan and determining the low-lying roads, which after today's rain is very appropriate. Coastal resiliency grants, we have $245,520, Pleasant Bay Living Shorelines, Jackknife Beach Salt Marsh Restoration, and Beach Nourishment, and this will mitigate coastal erosion, and this is to develop a detailed analysis of shoreline management options. And then last year, I think we had this on the slide last year as well, the Cape Cod Water Resources Restoration Plan. The town voted $850,000, which is a local match of 25%, to get $3.2 million in stormwater projects for the calendar years moving forward from 2023 to 2026. And there's a number of projects that will cover.
So this next slide is just from a couple weeks ago, and it was $1 million day in the office for us as staff with the town of Chatham. So this was a photo with the Lieutenant Governor, Kim Driscoll, awarding us 2 grants, one $500,000 grant for the dredging of Stage Harbor and 90 Bridge Street, and the second $1 million portion of it was for the 90 Bridge Street project. All of the projects are available on the website, and we have periodic updates to the select board. So very excited, and the Coastal Resources staff has been really great at getting grants for most of our waterfront properties, if not for just dredging on its own. So they do a great job with that. I'll continue. Okay. So the next section here is protect and enhance our drinking water quality. We have 2 of our Team Chatham staff members here with you to answer any questions following this presentation. We have our new DPW Director, Rob Faley, if you want to raise your hand, Rob. And we have our Deputy DPW Director, Tom Barr. Tom, if you want to raise your hand. Tom's actually been with the town of Chatham since 1998, working for Weston and Sampson as our water and sewer operations staff, and then progressed through his career to be the project manager, and we were able to steal him most recently, just last month, and he's our Deputy DPW Director. So the information here, again, is in our regular updates, and there'll be more discussion about it. Our water treatment plant, that's for wells 5 and 8. The annual town meeting had approved $19.8 million for the construction of the treatment plant to address iron, manganese, and PFAS, and that's going out to bid in October or November of this year. And then we have new wells 10 and 11. Construction is nearing completion, and we expect both lines to be online sometime late fall and early winter. And if you're still interested in this, we do updates to the select board. It's usually the second Tuesday of the month that talks about our pumping, our construction progress, and any testing results. And so that is available for you to grab online, or you can come to the meetings. And it's the second Tuesday of the month for the select board meeting. And then as we look ahead for planning, we will, again, usually we kick off with this meeting, the Summer Residence Town Meeting, to hear from you. This year we have this meeting, we have the special town meeting on September 18th. Again, the focus will be on the Center for Active Living in the project and some complementary articles, should that be passed, as well as a couple of financial articles for cleaning up at the end of the fiscal year. Then we'll have our budget summit, where again, we look back, we look forward, we check in with the select board's community value statements, their priorities, and hear from not just the select board, but we also invite the regional school district administration, as well as the finance committee and department staff. And then we fine tune our value statements and goals and objectives in December, and then we start to work on our prioritization once we get the budget requests from the town departments to look at the capital plan. And then it's about a 5 to 7 month process. We end up at annual town meeting, and that's in May 2024. There's been a recent bylaw change that allows the select board to set the date of town meeting by December 31st. So typically it's the second Monday of the month, but this gives us some flexibility to have it on a Saturday, and the board will set the time and date for that before December 31st. And again, it's really important to connect funding priorities with our goals and objectives. And then community connections are very important to us, and I hope you've been able to subscribe to the main sheet. We have directions on the website here, or you can catch any of our staff. We can help you with that. But the main sheet is our weekly newsletter, and it started during COVID. Again, keeping the community connected. We were at that time reporting a lot of just COVID statistics, but then we realized we should highlight and spotlight projects and successful projects that we've been working on, as well as identify some challenges. So then we did a few community forums virtually. We did community surveying. It was really a tremendous effort, and really appreciated all of your input to help the select board make their policy decisions and keep the town running during an emergency. Now it's just, it's not that exciting as trying to manage during an emergency, but certainly all of the priority projects, and it gives a little more information from what you might hear at a select board meeting, so certainly links. And if you look at the Notify Me section, which is the second picture, it shows you how to sign up for it. And then if you want to surf our town website, take a look. We have Budget Central, which has our new digital budget book that we just debuted this past fall. Anything town meeting, including town meeting results, we have those available on Town Meeting Central. And I just wanted to have a little bit of note or in time for that. So in Massachusetts, for annual town meeting, it has to be in person. And there's no absentee voting for town meeting. There's certainly absentee voting for the town election, but we receive that question quite a lot. So we do videotape it, and then it's available shortly after the meeting. It's because we have a quorum requirement. We actually need 100 attendees present. We always get that quorum. I think we were up to almost 1,100 at the last town meeting, and as select board chair Mentor said, every vote counts. There was an article or two that just by one vote. So it's important for you to remain connected and to see the results certainly right after. And then we have our financial transparency. If you're interested in looking in our operating budget and see how we're spending the town's funds, that's a great platform to just pick a subject or a topic. And the S&P ratings group had said that we were one of the first towns to actually have a financial transparency section on our town website, and is actually one of the few AAA towns to do so. And then social media, again, 24/7. This is where you would find the town's platforms for Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and again, it shows you how to sign up for the main sheet and other notifications. And we post on LinkedIn a lot about our jobs. There we go. Our jobs that are available. I think I'm breaking every rule of public speaking to have it right in front of me. So again, this is for you to help you remain connected. And our last slide here for town business is our new Chatham TV. Again, Channel 18 is moving to Channel 8. And you'll still be able to access all of the meetings and various recordings on the town's website, but we're rebranding that as of August 17th. And my last slide is really a thank you to Alex from Team Chatham. This is her last Summer Residence Advisory Committee, as you've heard a few times, and we really appreciate everything she's done over the many years of service. So thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
So I believe the next item is affordable and attainable housing initiatives. Robin, are you going to introduce that, or you'll do from there? Great, thank you.
I don't know, can we pull up the presentation for that?
They're doing it from behind the scenes.
Before I introduce Gloria, we did want to have a presentation that oh, thank you, fabulous. Okay, yeah, Gloria. So before I introduce you, I just wanted to, my name is Robin Laportio, by the way, and I'm representing Phil Richardson tonight, who is the chair of our subcommittee on workforce housing, which is affordable and attainable housing. For those of you who don't know Phil, besides often being quoted in the New York Times about affordable housing issues in California, where he's a developer and encounters lots of interesting issues, he's really fabulous and he's creative. In the last several years, he has developed several plans for the town to help them get the nice look and feel that we have with Chatham architecture, but also to help with the density problem that is always the kind of the tough issue when we talk about affordable housing. Because as we know, while it's great to have one-off homes here and there, the best way to tackle the affordable housing problem is to have a little more density. So in 2021, Phil developed this beautiful plan for the Buckley property. It's not being used, but we know that Chatham does have it in its back pocket and has 4 other parcels, so it could be used, and we're hopeful on that. As you'll see on the top left, Phil developed a lot of really interesting and I would say aesthetically pleasing homes that could be used in this development. And if you know, it reminded me of my son, who was a big Lego fan. When you look at the plan on the bottom right, you see how they all sort of neatly fit into this very small parcel and use the space really well. So he developed a community garden and an outdoor play space for children. So these are just some of the things that we work on and that Phil has spearheaded in the past, and we enjoy partnering with the town on this issue because we believe it's really important. And with that, I'll turn it over to Gloria, who has graciously appeared tonight to help us kind of learn more about all of the 4 parcels that the town has and the developments for them. So thank you, Gloria.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Gloria McPherson. I am the Housing and Sustainability Director for the town of Chatham. I've been here coming up on 1 year, although it feels like I've been eating, sleeping, and breathing housing in Chatham for a lot longer than a year. So this is a pretty dense presentation. I'm going to summarize slides relatively quickly. We'll have time for questions at the end. I'm also going to make this available on the housing webpage, so you'll be able to access this starting tomorrow morning. And I am always available for a call, email, or a drop-in. Phil Richardson takes advantage of that all the time. And he is a great guy. So overview of the presentation, I'm going to go over some housing terms, housing stats particular to Chatham, housing goals and strategies that we're working on now, and current housing initiatives. And I have questions, but if that's at the very end, that's fine. So just some key terms, so we're all on the same page. I think you probably know most of these. Area median income is just the midpoint of the average of salaries in a metropolitan statistic district. In the case of Barnstable County, it's the entire county. Affordable housing has a really clear state and federal definition through 40B. It's often referred to as low and moderate income housing, and it's for 80% of the area median income and lower. So just a quick note that our Affordable Housing Trust can actually fund projects up to 100% AMI, which wouldn't really be considered affordable. Attainable housing is a Chatham-specific definition, and we consider attainable housing up to 200% of the AMI, so twice the area median income. I have a slide coming up that's going to show you some of those numbers. But just to put it in context, the area median income for a family of 4 is 115,000 approximately. Workforce housing, that's a term that's thrown around a lot. There's no real definition for that. The closest thing that we have in the state of Massachusetts for a definition of workforce housing comes from the Mass Housing Grant Program for Workforce Housing, which funds projects that include housing between 80% and 120% AMI. Just so you know, it's not a standalone program. It's usually for gap funding for projects that include affordable also. And local preference comes up a lot, like how can we get people who, are already Chatham residents into our housing? Well, with application and justification to the former DHCD, Department of Housing and Community Development, which is now the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, EOHLC, because that rolls off the tongue easily. You can apply to have up to 70% of your affordable housing units given through lottery to people who either live or work in Chatham or have children in the Chatham schools. Subsidized housing inventory is an important term. The state has set a goal for each of the 351 towns in Massachusetts to have 10% of their permanent year-round housing stock affordable, so 80% AMI and below. Chatham actually just got 2 new affordable units through Habitat Online last week. So we're at 4.86 of our total housing stock being affordable. So we're pretty well below 10%. We have a lot of work to do. Chapter 40B, you hear a lot also, that is the state's regional planning legislation that is addresses regional housing disparities, and that's where that 10% affordable housing comes from. It allows developers to override local zoning so that you can get up to that 10%. A lot of people don't like that. I think that 40B is a really critical tool for the town of Chatham in order to actually develop housing at the density that we need to do it. Our zoning is really kind of like low density, so 40B can be really helpful. It can be a tool that we use. And I can say, not with 100% certainty, but close, almost all of the housing projects that we're gonna do in the town of Chatham to make affordable and attainable housing will be done through Chapter 40B. Otherwise, we're gonna get two units here and 4 units there. And the housing production plan is a document that each town in the state produces to lay out its strategy for hitting that 10%. Ours was last done in 2018, has a 5-year horizon, so we will be doing an update this year. Okay, and these are just some numbers so that you can get a sense of what the area median income is. I can email that information to everyone if you want. This is a chart just to give you a sense of where housing prices have gone since the pandemic. 2019, 725,000 was the median home price. 2022, 1.2 million. 2023 is already shaping up to be even higher than that. This shows the average wages of people who work in Chatham. These are actual jobs and actual people. Most of them retail, accommodations and food services, administration and waste services, social healthcare and social assistance, all below the area median income, and those are the vast majority of our jobs. And the average income needed to buy a medium-priced home in Chatham. This says 252, but my quick calculations for 2023 is already in the 300,000s. So it shows the disparity between what the majority of people who work in Chatham are earning and what it costs to afford a house here. Select board goals and objectives, which were touched on by Jill and Alex. Under social infrastructure, we have one main objective: increase the inventory of affordable and attainable housing units in Chatham. A lot easier said than done. We're working on several housing strategies right now. I'm going to go over them individually with their own slides. The first one is the housing production plan update, which we're going to be doing this year. We have some grant funding to do it. We're going to be putting out an RFP, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. And the goal of that is going to be to update our strategy, come up with new strategies, and really do a comprehensive housing needs assessment. The last housing needs assessment that was done did not include anything for attainable housing. So we really just looked at that 80% AMI and below. And this one, a large part of the goal is to really understand our need between 80% and 200% of the area median income. And this slide just lists a bunch of the things that hopefully we'll be able to get out of this plan. The first several bullet points are kind of typical. We already have those in our current plan. I think that with our additional grant funding, we'll be able to look at more creative things like creative financing strategies, limited equity co-ops. Right now, they're not really being financed that much here, but we have a lot of local banks that really understand our particular housing needs and situations. So I think there's an opportunity to work with them to develop some creative financing strategies, especially for those middle income or attainable housing developments. Also creative development strategies such as co-housing as a way of cost sharing. And legislative advocacy, so the unique needs of Chatham and the Cape are better understood and addressed at the state level. And the bottom part, I want to point out where I highlighted in blue. So a lot of that extra funding that went into this RFP is going to be for specific programmatic components. So I don't want to see just an implementation plan from our consultants. I want to know like the actual steps and the actual programs that we need to take to actually implement those. Deed restrictions, this is almost like a next step slide. Just so you know, all deed restrictions would be in perpetuity. You can do deed restrictions for affordability. An example of that would be the chop houses. And we're starting to develop a voluntary deed restriction program, perhaps through an RFP process like we do the land acquisition RFPs. And another thing we're looking at is year-round residency deed restrictions. Currently, we're not allowed to do that. All deed restrictions in the state have to be tied to an affordability requirement. But fortunately, Senate Docket 1040, which was filed by Julian Sear and Sarah Peak, actually addresses the possibility of doing year-round deed restrictions without an affordability component. I think that generally it takes a couple of years for these things to work their way through. So I don't think that's going to happen very soon, but definitely within the next 5 years. We also have our own home rule petitions. We have a couple that have to do with the trust. The first is to allow CPA funds to be used to fund projects up to 200% AMI. Right now they go for 100% AMI. And the second one, House Bill 1366, would actually expand our current affordable housing trust so that in addition to being able to do projects up to 100% AMI, we would be able to go all the way up to 200%. So it would really be taking attainable housing development and affordable housing development, putting the funding in one trust and putting the ability to do that development under the single trust. On June 26th, the Joint Committee on Housing met and took testimony. I testified along with Shireen Davis, one of the Select Board members, the chair of the Community Housing Partnership, and we also submitted some written testimony. And I followed up with Sarah Peak's office today, and they think that perhaps in the fall we'll hear about that. We have one other home rule petition that actually has not come up yet. I think it's in Finance Committee, not Joint Housing, but this is to establish a real estate property transfer fee, and this is for 0.5% to be paid by the purchaser for sales over $2 million. So the single most amount of time I spent on this was for that fourth bullet point, where I actually looked through every property sale for 2022 and looked at all of the ones that were 2 million above, documented them, put them in a spreadsheet, multiplied it by 0.005 for 5%. And had this been in place last year, we would have generated almost $1 million in revenue through the property transfer fee. Zoning is another way of increasing our capacity to build affordable and attainable housing. Right now, we're working on West Chatham Neighborhood Center zoning and also an inclusionary and incentive bylaw, which would require the inclusion of affordable units in any development over a certain threshold. The planning board hasn't decided what that threshold is right now. Some other possibilities are listed there. That would probably be for a future town meeting. This slide, take it all in, I'm not going to go over everything, but the town of Chatham has been very committed to the creation of housing based on town meeting action, funding allocations, and the purchase of property. Right now, we have 4 properties in play: Stepping Stones Road, 127 Old Harbor Road, Meeting House Road, and Main Street. There's the potential 5th property, which was mentioned. So if the Warren article on the Council on Aging at 1610 Main Street passes, then we would have that town-owned property at 193 Stony Hill, which could be converted for housing use. Just to go over a few of these slides, Stepping Stones Road, where we are in that process, we own it. We converted the use to housing at town meeting this past May. We had a consultant do some test fits, which is just showing some ways that like single-family homes and duplexes could potentially lay on the site. And our next steps are going to be doing some more test fits. The Affordable Housing Trust wants to see more development options. We look specifically at single-family homes and duplexes on ownership lots, and I think that it's possible to do maybe more units under a rental plan, or maybe even under an ownership plan. But we'll be soliciting consultants to do some more test fits on that. 127 Old Harbor Road was a property that was bequested to the town in 1971. It's been used for various municipal purposes, not housing. A playground was constructed per the bequest, which is kind of carved off in the red area to the left. The remaining area was converted for housing purposes at the last town meeting. There's an existing house and a barn on there. Where we are now, we did an initial staff walkthrough just to do an inspection to see the condition of the structures. We found 2 full oil tanks, which we had pumped and removed. And the next steps are to do a feasibility study, to look at the house and the barn, to analyze the structural stability and the suitability for use for housing purposes. And really, everything else, next steps, is gonna hinge on what that report says, if the buildings are salvageable and if they're constructed in a way that is suitable for housing development. Meeting House Road, 137, this was a property that was bought by the Affordable Housing Trust. This is one of the properties that we're doing a community engagement process with Barrett Planning Associates. We're probably about 3/4 of the way through the process. One of the things we've also been doing is meeting with the butters to make sure that their needs of the current shared drive are met. We issued a request for information to developers so that we could better understand what would make this site and also the Main Street site more appealing to them from a development perspective, so that we can start thinking about what we want to see on those sites with respect to the type of building, whether it's homeownership or rental. And the next steps are as follows. I have to go over the RFI results with the trust. That's slated for August 29th. And we're going to come up with some preferred development concepts that the consultants are going to draw up, and that's going to inform the request for proposal, which we hope to issue this fall or winter. And these are just some of the conceptual drawings that show various densities and various building types and various parking layouts. And we're doing the same process for the Main Street property. This is also known as the former Buckley property. We own all of it except for the house lot, which is carved out in red. And we're still in the community engagement process with that. Request for information covered both of those properties because there was a question about whether it might make sense to develop the properties individually or together. So that was a large part of the request for information. And again, it's the same process that we're going to go through with the Meeting House Road property. Timer, 15 minutes. I have one more slide after this. These are some of the concepts. And this is a broad overview of what long-term implementation looks like. As you can see, there is a lot of feedback and a lot of back and forth with everything that has to happen before construction begins, and then we do the lottery to find tenants. Generally, these processes last, maybe up to 6-8 years. I think that's it's a long process. And that's it. like I said, I'll make this available on the website, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
So next up, we have irrigation issues, the Water and Sewer Subcommittee of the SRAC.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Joel Rotner. I'm the chairman of the Water and Sewer Subcommittee of SRAC. And we've been looking at those issues this year. And I just want to start by really sincerely thanking Dr. Duncanson. He's been a cornerstone of these projects ever since I've been in Chatham. He's worked on them for years and years. And I think you'll see he's brought us to a pretty good place as I continue this presentation. The presentation is in large part based on the presentation that he presented to us in an early July meeting. I think you saw the schedule there. I'm not going to try to recreate that presentation. And if I recommend it to you, it's probably similar to the one that Jill mentioned that he gave to the select board. I'm sure it'll be fascinating. One of the things that interested us and brought us to Dr. Duncanson again this year is the sewers. The state has implemented new Title V regulations. And if nothing else happens, everybody in town, everybody in the state will have to upgrade their their septic systems to meet these Title V regulations. And as you can imagine, it's not going to be a very cheap process. The good news is, any town that presents to the state a comprehensive wastewater treatment plan, which is approved by the state and implements the treatment plan, will be exempt from those regulations or those requirements that each individual citizen upgrade the septic system. Chatham has for years. I'm sorry, excuse me. Chatham has for years been working toward sewering the entire town. And we've had a comprehensive wastewater treatment plan going back to, I think, maybe 2002 when it was started, and I'm not exactly sure when it was adopted. So having that plan puts Chatham far ahead. In fact, the state requires that the plan be submitted within 2 years if you're going to get the exemption. Dr. Duncanson is confident that our plan is ready to be submitted. He's confident it will be approved, and that is the good news. But that's not the end of the story. The question remains as to whether or not the state will require a speedier implementation of the plan. And even if the state doesn't require a speedier implementation, it's going to be expensive. And it has been expensive. And it's not getting any cheaper. Costs are going up, interest rates are going up, grants are going to be harder to get. And that part of the picture we're leaving for the Finance Committee to address later on. That is far and away the more difficult part of the picture. I will say there is one other aspect that everybody has to be familiar with, and it's not to be overlooked. Once the sewer comes down your street, and we hope it's sooner rather than later, you're going to have to hook up. And that also can be an expensive proposition. The Summer Residence Advisory Committee is actively investigating ways to reduce that expense that we can present at a later time. It's also a subject for the Town Water and Sewer Committee, and we've been in communication with them, and they're looking at that subject. And that's going to be an ongoing process, and perhaps next year we can report further on what ideas and possibilities we have for reducing the connection costs. That brings us to water. And again, Chatham is very fortunate, and I'm going to try to paraphrase what Dr. Duncanson told us. Dr. Duncanson, in effect, said Chatham is fortunate to have groundwater that is hundreds of feet deep. And furthermore, Chatham's demand for water is only a fraction of the available water supply. From that perspective, and this is a direct quote from Dr. Duncanson, from that perspective, there is plenty of water. However, there's always a problem. And in recent summers, you've seen signs appear about water use restrictions. And that's related to the stress that's been put on the system resulting from drought and from the capacity to get the water out of the ground. In response to that issue, the Water and Sewer Commission, both the drought issue and the withdrawal issue, the Water and Sewer Commission has worked on triggers as to when it believes the town should implement water use restrictions. And I'd like to put up the first slide, if I may. I believe this is an ongoing process for the Water and Sewer Committee. It may be the final process, but this is where they were the last I knew. And you can read it. I don't want to spend a lot of time reviewing it, but as you can see, they've identified drought levels on the one hand and water use restrictions to accompany those drought levels. In addition, they've indicated pumping levels. You'll see where it says 17 hours. I'm sorry, but I need new glasses. 17 hours, 18 hours, 19 hours. That relates to the number of hours the pumps in town are run. And that relates to the demand. And the longer the pumps run, the more the wear and tear is on the pumps, but also the greater the strain on the well and the capacity of the well to recharge. So that's a significant issue, and you can see how in times of drought, the demand would increase, and it would be prudent to impose restrictions to reduce the supply. In response to the recommendations of the Water and Sewer Committee, and as a suggestion to the committee and to that committee and to the town, the Summer Residence Advisory Committee does have one recommendation. The state DEP has also looked at this issue, and they've come up with certain exceptions to the restrictions. And if you could put on slide 2, please. So this is from the Mass Department of Environmental Protection website. And I don't know, I hope you can read it, but I highlighted what was important to us, and that's the following water uses may be allowed when mandatory restrictions are in place. And if you jump down, irrigations of gardens, flowers, and ornamental plants by means of handheld hoses and drip irrigation. And the Summer Residence Advisory Committee recommends that these exceptions recommended by the state be included in whatever final recommendations are adopted by the town. I don't think it's hard to understand, and we've discussed this with Rob Faley, the Public Works Director. Use of irrigation, drip irrigation, adds very little to the overall household use of water every day. And I can see why the state, for that reason alone, would recommend an exemption for drip irrigation. Now, I think it was particularly appropriate or coincidental or whatever you want to call it for this presentation to notice that the beginning of the week, I think I first saw them, some signs went up around town recommending water use restrictions. It's my understanding that those recommendations do not arise out of drought. Because right now, according to the state, we're at 0 drought level. So that leaves infrastructure. And in this case, I don't believe it was the number of hours pumping. As I understand it from looking at the select board meeting where this was adopted, it was that there was low water in the tanks on a couple of occasions, which suggests to me, and if I'm mistaken, maybe Rob can correct me, that the wells, the town system wasn't able to pump enough water into the tank at various periods of time to meet the existing demand. And I'm going to get to that in a second. But the other thing that's important from the summer residents' point of view and that SHRAC recommends, when a recommendation like this is in place, and when it's in place not because of drought, but because of problems with the town system, those people who've gone to the trouble to put in wells for outdoor water use and irrigation, which the town strongly recommends, for obvious reasons. One is to get them off the town system. And two is, as Dr. Duncanson has told us many times, it doesn't make a lot of sense to use that very wonderfully treated water to put on, when all you're doing is putting it on your lawn. In a situation like we have now, it was the recommendation of this committee that there be notification that private well owners are exempt. Restricting, even voluntarily, the use of water from a private well at this particular time has no effect on the problem of the inability to get water out of the ground. And that brings me to the question that our committee has for Mr. Faley, and we've told him we were going to ask it, is what is the town doing to address this problem? And I'm going to turn it over, the presentation over to Mr. Faley at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you and good evening. I really don't have a presentation. It's more of an answer to the question. So we are going through a kind of a comprehensive water study to find out what challenges we have. Whether that's increasing the number of wells, increasing the amount of storage we have, or conservation measures. We'll have to wait and see what that study recommends. It's being undergoing right now. We should know that answer in the coming months. But I guess we're leading up to the next piece of it, which what's the status of our infrastructure, our water infrastructure? So currently we have wells 10 and 11 under construction. Should I just forward this myself? So that's the current building out on Mill Pond, the treatment plant. It's under construction. Robert B. Auer is the contractor who's been working hard to get this project completed. The building is largely complete. Site work continues. The building should be up and running, and wells 10 and 11 should be activated this fall. That's just a picture of, the access road to well 10. Well 11 is a very similar situation. I'm more of a visual person, so I'm just, I'll speak through it, but I think the pictures speak for themselves for the most part. This is the inside of the treatment plant. That's the finished work that's being done. It's on schedule. The electric and fiber optic and alarm work is ongoing. The chemical storage tanks for the treatment of the water, they're installed. Again, it's the chemicals are used for corrosion, disinfection, and sequestering iron and manganese in this treatment facility. We also have, going out to bid in the very near future, the training field wells 5 and 8. So recently we know that wells 5 and 8 showed PFAS detection, PFAS 6. Last year, we put well 5 on a temporary treatment vessel with granulated activated carbon. And that's been in place. We typically only use that in the high demand summer months when it's needed. We try to reserve that for when it is needed. We don't want to waste that treated water in the winter time when it's not utilized. So here's a engineering rendering of what the new training field well facility would look like. It's a rather large building, and when I get to the next slide, you'll see why. So that one cell that you saw, that activated carbon vessel that was outside, will be added to 3 others. That's what you see on the left side of the screen. So it'll have 4 GAC filters. The green vessels in the middle will be green sand filters. That'll remove the iron and the manganese from the water, because the iron and manganese will foul the PFAS filtration. So we want to remove that before it gets to the PFAS filtering. And again, this we're meeting tomorrow morning to go over a bidding schedule. So we are actively pursuing this, and hopefully, it'll probably take 12 to 18 months to construct. So by 2025, we'll have wells 5 and 8 back up and running again. And that's all I had for you.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you. So the next agenda item is the Chatham Communications Subcommittee.
Thank you, Jill. Good evening. I'm Stuart Green. I'm the chair of the Communications Subcommittee. I just want to say it's nice to see so many faces in the audience. It's a good show of force. I have 2 quick points to make, which is why I'm not getting up to the podium. The first one is this year the Summer Residence Advisory Committee has developed and distributed the first direct survey in its history in an effort to find out objectively what Chatham summer residents are really concerned about. This initiative has been supported by Corey Metters and the Select Board, the full SRAC Committee, and the Subcommittee of Communications, which includes Jeannie Allen to my right, Jeff Spalter to her right, and Professor Ron Mandersheed, who's on assignment. If you haven't voiced your concerns to date, at the back of the room, behind the doors, we have additional surveys. You can fill them out tonight. There's a box to place them in, and we hope that we'll hear your voice. Can I have a show of hands to see if anyone has already filled it out or previously? Oh, okay. That's encouraging. Thank you. The second point I want to make is we want you to know that we encourage your attendance at our meetings. They're held every Friday through August 18th at 9 o'clock a.m. in the meeting hall adjoining this room. If you can't come to the meetings in person, you're able to participate via the Teams software on the town website. And you can also participate through the Teams website software. In addition, we have regular discussions, as Jamie, me, and our chair has mentioned. Includes town officials, representatives of different commissions, and representatives on vital issues. So we encourage you to at least listen or watch those. Also, throughout the year, you can send questions and concerns to the Summer Residence Advisory Committee through the town mailbox, and we thank the town manager for helping us with that. On that note, I want to thank you for attendance. Look forward to your participation and hope you all fill out the surveys. Thank you.
Thank you. The next agenda item is the Chatham Scorecard by the Chatham Finance Subcommittee.
Hey, I'm Tom Garvey. I will take you very quickly through a scorecard that I think something very similar has been presented in prior years. We want to just kind of give you a quick update where we stand with assessed values of residences here and tax rate. I think if we can bring up those slides, it'd be great. There we go. And there's a different, okay. Okay. Well, I mean, in the interest of time, I want to just keep this moving. Fiscal 2023, assessed values of residences in the town were $9.4 billion. That's up 20% from the prior year in '22, and it's up about 50% from 2017.
Mark, we're looking for the scorecard presentation.
There we go. Okay. All right, so as I said, total assessed values on residences in the town for fiscal '23 were $9.3 billion, up from $6 billion in '17, so almost a 50% increase in 6 years. And as Alex indicated, that number for next year will increase. Exactly what it will be, it's probably in the range of 10 to 15% of assessed value increased. The overall tax receipts that the town collects from residences for fiscal '23 was $36 million. That's up from a little under 36 million in '22, up from 30 million in 2017. So about 20% increase in 6 years. So property values up 50%, tax collections required up 20% in 6 years. Overall, a tax rate of $3.88 per $1,000 of assessed value. Of that total tax of the 36 million, there was an effort last year made to try to assess how much of that is summer residence, how much of that is permanent, full-time residence. It was roughly a 2/3 split of summer residence values to full-time residents. So summer residents, around $24 million of tax receipts. We don't have an exact number. That was an effort last year that we think probably can be updated. I think as Jill and Alex indicated, the number of full-time residents has increased. So that number may be slightly different now, but you're seeing that the summer residents are paying a good chunk of the total tax. Okay? Can we go on to the next slide? Yeah. I think just overall, in terms of where do we stand in Chatham in terms of tax rate versus the Cape overall? So Chatham is paying the lowest rate of residential property tax on the Cape. The overall Cape is close to $7. We're paying in Chatham $3.88 per thousand this past year. Harwich is $6.64. Orleans is $6.23. Brewster $6.99. So we are paying a lower tax than a tax rate than our other Cape residents. I think what we are seeing is that the average tax bill on a single-family home in Chatham was about $5,200. Across the Cape, that number was $5,700. So overall, the assessment, the rate that people are being assessed on their properties, in Chatham, we're at 0.39%. The Cape is about 66.66%. So I think the town has done a good job managing the finances. Property values have increased. Budget in the town has increased, but not at the rate of the assessed values. So I think overall, we're enjoying a favorable tax rate. Okay. And Mike, do you want to?
Yes.
Good evening. My name is Mike Waters. I'm the chair of the Finance Subcommittee, and I will present the rest of our report, which is focused on one subject, and that is sewer debt, a subject I'm sure is near and dear to all of your hearts. But let me tell you something about how we have gotten into this present situation. If you can put that section up.
Oh. It was the prior slides that you had on finance.
Finance Subcommittee report. And if you could go to the next page, please.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay. So the town adopted a plan to sewer the entire town of Chatham. What I've included here is the language from the experts' report. You can see that the plan was divided into two sections. Phase one was to address areas of immediate concern, and phase two was to address the rest of the town. This was because the town was being paid on the residential tax, and we didn't want to leave any homeowners stuck at the end with a septic system. Everyone was going to be put on the town sewers, and it was going to take 30 years. However, there were some changes this year that cause us to take a look at this plan and make some suggestions from the summer residents regarding how to address it. The state regulations changed Title V on septic systems to the point where individual homeowners that were not connected up to a sewer system were going to be required to pay $30,000 plus was the estimate to upgrade their septic systems, a matter of concern for a lot of individuals. In discussions with the state, Dr. Duncanson reported that an agreement had been reached that in lieu of that, the town of Chatham could present a watershed plan that would address the rest of the town and obviate the need for these individuals. However, that's a negotiation with the state, and Dr. Duncanson was clear that the state hadn't made a specific commitment as to timing, and that will be a subject that will come up. If you could go to the next page, please. So this is a rough projection of capital debt repayments in Chatham over the period up to 2041, which includes the entire sewer period. The 30 years would run out about 2040, and the time for phase two would start about 2030. This does not include anything for the payment of phase two. It was estimated by the experts that were brought in that phase one would cost about $230 million, and a good portion of that has been spent. And phase two would cost about $100 million. Since that isn't on this, you have to kind of envision a dome going over the top of the last 10 years, which would include the repayment of what it costs to do phase two. And that would substantially increase the payments in that later period, but we really do not know by how much. First, a little bit of phase two has been done. When we connected up to Harwich, we very sensibly took care of the towns that were easily served by the connecting sewerage. Secondly, the projection of $100 million doesn't include any amount of grants that we might get, although Dr. Duncanson did point out to us that there are a lot more people looking for grants, a lot more municipalities now. And the $100 million also does not include any increased costs that may have happened in the last 20 years. And it's logical to assume that the cost of construction, as everything else, has gone substantially higher. So we think it's very important, and we think the Select Board is going in the right direction in getting a handle on this big project and starting to do everything that we can to keep the cost down and plan for how we will handle the rest of it. If you could turn to the last page. So, I mean, one of the things that troubled us is that here in 1 year, in July, the state had changed the rules with respect to septic systems, and in August, the fellow who's handled this for 20 years is leaving the town. The town has, or the Select Board has taken the step of putting a number of capable people with knowledge of this subject in charge, and we're sure that we're going to have a good transition, although this is difficult for them to have to deal with this in this fashion. What we have suggested in our report is that there is a need for public education on this subject. I don't think, since it all happened in such a short period, the change that the state made, people are fully aware of what the town has to deal with, so that in public meeting reports by the new team to the Select Board, the town will become educated. Also, a lot of people, and we actually heard from some people, had a great fear that they were suddenly going to be confronted with this $30,000 cost to refurbish their septic system in short order, something that wasn't in their plans. And the way the town is going to approach it with the state, they will not have to do that. And I think it's important for the town to continue that approach, although you have to recognize the state has some leverage in that negotiation because of this provision they've included, and to educate or advise these people that they should not be concerned about that we're taking a route that will protect them. And I think that would be useful. The third thing that concerned us is that in this discussion with the state, Dr. Duncanson pointed out that we have a very good history. We, as a town, Chatham was very early into dealing with the sewer issue. And Chatham has met its obligations, and we have put in miles of sewer in our town. The problem is, because of concern about the expense, a lot of people have not connected to the sewer. When we discuss this with the state, they are no doubt going to be concerned about the fact that putting in the sewer accomplishes very little if people are still using outmoded septic systems to discharge their waste. So we urge that some plan be put together that will drive a greater degree of connection to the sewer system. It's mostly about cost for people, and I know there's a low-interest loan available from Barnstable, but I'm sure there are other more creative ways that people could come up with so that people who can show a need would be able to find a vehicle to transition into this connection. I think it's a very important part of going forward with the state, that show them that we can deliver. Finally, there is the cost of Phase 2 itself, and we really have no idea what that's going to be, but the revised watershed plan should deal with the sewering of the entire rest of the town, and it's an opportunity to take a look at what a more realistic cost is and to start thinking how we're going to manage it in the not too distant future when we have to deal with this problem. We'd like to thank and compliment everyone that's worked on the sewer system and the people who are going to continue this. We think that they have done a great job in trying to get a massive project taken care of. I'm afraid they're going to be challenged a little more in the future, and we thought we'd give a few suggestions that have occurred to us in going through that. Thank you.
Okay, to kick the question and answer session off, SRAC has a few prearranged questions around affordable and attainable housing and sewers. So if I can direct the first question to Gloria McPherson, the Town Housing and Sustainability Director. SRAC is aware that the Buckley property has had Barrett Consulting engage the residents on impressions of various housing configurations. Can you advise on any developers that the town may have approached or will be approaching to determine which configuration is more feasible to build?
Sure. So the town issued a request for information on both properties, actually. It wasn't specific to the Buckley property, but we asked specific questions about Buckley, specific questions about the Meeting House Road property, and questions about financing, both of them or individually. We issued it to 6 developers. We got 4 responses back from 5 developers. So 2 answered together, the Preservation of Affordable Housing and the Community Development Partnership. Habitat for Humanity answered, HAC, and what was the last one? Oh, why am I drawing a blank? Sorry, well, there were 4 responses. So 3 were very consistent with each other. 1, Habitat, was very different. That's because they use different models of development. So the other 3 were firms and companies that specifically develop affordable housing and that kind of workforce housing up to 120%. And they do specifically rental housing because that's where most of the state and federal subsidies lie. So Habitat's model is single-family homeownership homes for 80% AMI and below. In fact, it's their mission that they do not go over 80%. So none of the responses said how you should develop either property, but they did give a lot of really good information. So all 3 responses, other than Habitat, said it's really not feasible to do single-family home ownership houses at a density that makes sense on these properties. So I think that if we go the single-family home ownership model, we should think about what that means, because Habitat's really the only kind of model out there to do that. Their density is much lower. But all 3 also said that if single-family home ownership was important to the town, they would be willing to work with a local partner such as Habitat to take a portion of each property or one of the properties, kind of peel it off and do a few home ownerships. But in general, the consensus from the developers was we need a certain threshold of a number of units that's going to be economically viable, and that threshold ranged between, say, 50 and 60, which is a lot. So one of the questions in the RFI was, does it make sense to develop the properties together as one project? And, you know, they all said, yeah, that would be something we would consider. It's a way of getting the numbers that you need to be able to get the funding and subsidies that you need to do it. So I don't think that specifically answered your question, but we didn't get that kind of information. Like, nobody said, oh yeah, we should do 29 townhouses and, you know, 1 apartment building and 4 single-family homes. It was much more big picture financing and what was going to be feasible.
Thank you. Okay, the next question is for Judy Giorgio, if she's here.
Yeah, Judy's participating remotely.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. So Judy, if you can hear me, and Judy is the town health agent. SRAC has learned that, and I apologize in advance for the lengthy question, there's a lot packed in here, but SRAC has learned that Massachusetts recently amended its Title V septic regulations to require nitrogen abatement system installation on existing septic systems and nitrogen impaired watershed areas unless the town applies for a watershed permit within 2 years of enactment. The watershed permit would grant an exception to affected homeowners with septic systems, provided that the town advises that it is working on sewer installation. Can you speak to what the town's plans are relative to applying for the permit, giving the town's phased sewering plan?
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we've touched on this, a few of your speakers have touched on this already. The state enacted these new regulations effective July 7th that would require most of Cape Cod, which would be considered nitrogen sensitive areas, to individual homeowners to to put in IA septic systems. But Chatham is lucky because we are one of only 4 towns on Cape Cod that has its own wastewater treatment plant, and we have a comprehensive wastewater management plan, as you all know. And we also have the Pleasant Bay Alliance, which put together with Dr. Bob and a group of members of that alliance a watershed permit. And that watershed permit is already in effect. So that covers about 3,000 properties in town. And those properties are exempt from the requirement to put IAs in. The rest of the town, which is considered nitrogen-sensitive area, is going to require the town to put in a notice of intent to DEP for a watershed permit. And we have begun that process. We have up to 2 years to do that. And we've begun that process working with our town engineers that have been working on our comprehensive wastewater plan, our sewering plan for a number of years. So as you've heard, Dr. Bob has assured us that he feels very confident because we have such a thorough comprehensive wastewater management plan that can be easily transferred into a watershed permit, and the rest of the town will be exempt from putting in IA systems.
Great.
I can answer any other questions.
Thank you. So I have a couple of questions that have been submitted from the audience on note cards, and I'm not exactly clear who I would direct this question to, but we'll give it a shot. It's also around sewers. So the question is, rather than burden each homeowner with the cost of hiring an engineer and architect, why doesn't the town just hire one of each? So maybe Rob Faley or Judy can answer that question.
I guess I can start. The engineers would be required for the connection from the home itself to the line. And each home would be an individual site that would have specific conditions that, they would have to design for. I know there has been some talk about the town providing some pump systems for properties that what may need pumps, and that would help alleviate the cost for that. But as far as doing the individual designs for each property, that's not part of our plan. So currently it is required that each individual homeowner hire an engineer and design the connection from their house to the stub.
If I can interrupt, the Water and Sewer Committee is. Put your mic on. Thank you. The Water and Sewer Committee is looking into that connection issue, as I mentioned. We are working with Rob, and we'll be working with the Town Water and Sewer Committee. And one of the issues specifically is an engineer necessary for each individual site, or are there other ways to achieve the same purpose at a lower cost? We don't have an answer for that yet. That's one of the issues we're looking at. Judy mentioned the grinder pump issue. The Water and Sewer Committee is looking at that issue. We're looking at that issue. Anyone that needs a grinder pump, that's a huge expense. Not every home needs a grinder pump, and there are different ways to treat that issue. I think Rob has already started a process to try to address that. Is that correct, Rob?
For the grinder pumps?
For the grinder pumps.
Yeah, we're trying to, well, if we can eliminate them, that's the option that we'd like to choose. The low-pressure systems. If we can use pumping stations and gravity systems, that would be the preferred alternative, but it's just simply not possible throughout all of town. And I'll go back to the architect or engineer question. When we hire GHD and our engineering teams, they're not individuals. They are groups of dedicated, very knowledgeable people that we put to task for some of these projects. So we have their many years of expertise to rely on. So I don't think one individual person would be able to, satisfy the needs of Chatham during certain times when we're building the sewer systems out.
Yeah, and also it might be problematic for the town to hire an engineer for private purposes. Again, this is, we're governed by Mass General Law, and Mass General Law prohibits public funds for private purposes. So as nice as it might be to get everyone connected and do that, it might be you'd have to look at a creative way to do that. I have no other towns, and I think the people are looking at that, but right now there's no legal way to provide those services to a private entity.
Thank you.
I would say, just to follow up, I'm not sure every town requires an engineer for the connection.
No, each connection has to be designed by an engineer, but it needs to be installed by a licensed utility installer.
Thank you. Okay, the next question is around the airport. So I don't know who to direct this question to, but many small airplanes still use leaded gas. The emissions coming from the airplanes that use leaded gas is like confectioner sugar dropping below anywhere the plane flies. Leaded emissions is hazardous. What is used at our airport?
Do we still have an airport commissioner with us?
Yeah, currently, most of the airplanes that operate in and out of Chatham use 100 low lead avgas. The industry is right in the middle of revamping the fuel for the entire fleet. It's going to take a few years, but 100 low lead will eventually be phased out, and a non-leaded type fuel will be replacing it. That's the primary source for fuel right now.
Thank you. Okay, I think this question is best directed to Gloria McPherson. How many affordable units do we have now, and how many are required to meet the 10% goal?
So currently, we have 180 affordable units, and that is 4.86%. So we're under 5%, we're less than half. It's not quite as simple as just like doubling that number to get there. So the percentage is based on the number of year-round units. So as we build more units that are not affordable, our actual percentage of affordable units goes down. So it's a little bit of a moving target. At minimum, we're getting over 200 where we're at. If we continue to have, a lot of construction of new single-family homes that are not affordable, then we'll need additional, exactly. So, but yeah, we're hundreds behind at this point.
Thank you. Okay, I know who to direct this question to. Alex Halela, come on down. Why is OPEB and pension separate line items on the tax bill and not incorporated in the total town tax amount?
The OPEB liability that you see on the tax bill, which is the 1.5%, which we repurposed from the 3% land bank when that expired. So the 1.5% surcharge is just that. It's a surcharge, similar to the CPA, the Community Preservation Act surcharge, that is also called out separately. So it's a separate commitment by the assessors, and we collect it separately, and we have to account for it separately. And just to let the public know, it raises about $560,000 a year to go into our OPEB trust fund, which it looks better on our balance sheet and helps us meet that liability, hopefully within 15 years.
Great, thank you. Okay, this last question may be directed to Rob Faley. Has town decreased water pressure to homes in the last few days?
The question, like an intentional decrease of pressure?
That would be the way I would read it, yes.
Okay, no, nothing intentional. What we've seen historically, especially in the summer months, irrigation systems come on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So we hit low water levels in the standpipes early morning hours on those days. That may reduce the amount of pressure that some homeowners are seeing. I may rely on Tom Barr, the deputy here, to see if he has any other maybe indications of why pressure may be lower in parts of town recently.
Yeah, Rob hit it on the head. It's the tank levels. When they get lower, especially those early morning hours, the hydraulics of the system, the pressure is going to drop dramatically throughout the town. And the more people that are using the water, the quicker the tanks drop. So therefore, the hydraulics levels of the system are going down.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, that's all the questions that have been submitted by note card. So the audience is free to ask questions at the mic. Please state your name, if you would, and we'll have a few minutes for that, so feel free to step forward.
Jamie, while we're waiting for that, we have a question from someone participating remotely.
Sure.
They're asking, they would like to discuss the new rule regarding a requirement to register homes that are being rented and new limits regarding the number of occupants allowed in the rentals. So this is a short-term rental registration. I know Judy Giorgio could speak to that if you would like her to do so now.
That'd be great. Judy, if you're still with us.
Judy, we can't hear you either.
We've been kicked off the Teams meeting. So we'll try to reestablish.
I have one little comment I wanted to make, and that is that to announce anybody here who is a member of the community of South Chatham, our annual meeting is August 26th. It starts at 3 o'clock in the afternoon at the South Chatham Village Community Center. So if you're a South Chatham resident, come to the meeting. Jill will be our speaker.
Great, thank you. Okay, yes, sir.
I have two things that I would like to address to the microphone. I have two items I would like to address to the select board and also to the committee here and also to the select board of the town of Chatham. And I speak in the interest of the members of the summer committee and also the individuals that come for a vacation. They go to the permit office to get their permit, and it's only open from 10 to 1. And my neighbor, who came down from New York State to stay with his uncle to get his 95-year-old uncle's transfer station permit, and he went on the Thursday, and I'm trying to remember the date, the 26th or so of June, before his permit expired. And he walked into the permit office and he stood in line for an hour and 20 minutes because there was 115 people ahead of him, because there was only available time to get the permit from 10 in the morning until 1 p.m. I waited until Saturday, I think it was the 30th, to come in and get my permit, and I figured that most people would have gotten their permits by that time. I was in line for an hour and 20 minutes because there was 120 people ahead of me. I walked in at 12:30 and I left at 1:30 or 1:45. And there were only 2 people able to issue the permits. And my concern is there was a third person there and they were only issuing shellfish permits. And that person only saw 4 or 5 people the whole time I was there. On top of that, I saw at least 12 or 15 people walk in the door, walk over to see how many people were in the line. I'm out of here, and they left because they didn't want to stand in line for an hour and a half or longer. And I just wonder why the town can't, for the last 2 weeks of June, before the permits expire, open that permit office up from 9 in the morning until 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon and take care of the people when they come in. That's my first comment. And the second comment that I have is, I regularly attend with my friends the beach in Harding's Beach on the Upper Beach. And we walked in there the end of June, and the trash cans continued to be, there was only 2 there. Each year in the past, there's always been at least 3, sometimes 4, and there's also no recycle bins. So I called the Public Works, and about the last week of June or the first week of July, and I mentioned the fact that the bins were overflowing, and why didn't they have more bins? And I asked the woman, and she said, just a minute, I'll transfer you to the Director of Public Works. So I got transferred, and I asked for the director, and she said he's not available, so I explained the problem. And she said, oh, we have the bins on order, but we don't have them right now. I see a lack of administration ability in the Public Works Department if they are waiting till the end of June to order barrels for trash collection on the beaches when they knew for several months before that they did not have enough. And I just bring that to the Board of Selectmen, and I bring it to your attention also, that I think that that needs to be addressed. There's no, and on the 2nd or 3rd of July, and they tell me, the woman told me that they collect in the morning. Well, also a truck came by at 3 o'clock in the afternoon because the barrels were overflowing and there was trash all over the ground next to the 2 barrels. And I also asked about recycle bins. And she says, oh, we don't have any recycle bins. I commend the town for doing a great effort to recycle at the transfer station. From plastic bottles and cans, they all go into a particular place. But if they're put into a trash barrel at the beach, they go into a dump truck and they go into the transfer station and dumped on the ground, and they go to the dump somewhere else outside of the state. And I just think that that's too bad that they have to do that. So many people are so concerned about recycling, and yet the town is not making an effort to see that they get taken care of at the beaches. So I think that needs to be addressed by the administration. And Jill, perhaps you can also address that.
Thank you for your
Okay.
questions.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Charlie O'Connell. I own a home at 53 Shane Drive here in Chatham. I'd like to talk to you for a minute about the new regulations that have been issued by the Board of Health that went into effect August 1st, that restrict the addition of bedrooms depending upon the size of one's lot. The Board of Health is doing a terrific job of trying to address nitrogen runoff and water issues, and so I don't blame them for doing everything they can to find solutions to that. But I think in this case, they've really gone outside their wheelhouse. The regulations are very broad in nature, in the sense that they're really land use regulations because they affect land throughout the town, and they also impact the property rights of every resident in town. And so while perhaps people would agree with them or not agree with them, I think the issue is that a small town board of just a few members has put these regulations in place when I believe something that involves land use and property rights broadly really requires more consideration by the planning board, by the select board, and really probably should make its way to town meeting to make sure that all residents all of which are impacted by this
really have a chance to opine on whether it's fair and appropriate and the best possible solution. I have to personally think it's a regressive plan. I think it impacts those who own modest homes in a disproportionate way, but others would think differently. But the important point is that it really, I think, deserved much broader discussion and is really exceeds what I think what best practices would suggest is the scope of the Board of Health. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
My name's Bob Anthony. I live over in Dairy Street. This is my first summer residence meeting, so I figured I might I had an opportunity before the meeting several weeks ago to get a tour of the current COA facility. And met the director, and she was very gracious to give me about a 20-minute tour. It was a Thursday. It was a little quiet in the morning, so that was great. And I wanted to learn a little bit more about what's going on because you read a lot about it in the paper and haven't been part of the town. So I did learn that the 193 Stony Hill property currently requires major elevator service repairs and HVAC replacement, many deferred general maintenance projects that have gone on for years that have not been addressed, and more continue to follow. I also learned that the annual budget the COA uses addresses operational costs only and not infrastructure improvements, and it's the way they fall under the department they're under. Is it Parks and Recreation, or I forget what she said, the group that the funding comes under, but they don't have their own budget like the harbor master has a budget or something like that. So, and finally, 30 to 40% of the existing facility is unusable, unfortunately, due to these limitations, HVAC issues, elevator issues, and things that are falling and falling apart and not being addressed. And here we're on the precipice of looking at a new facility, which is great. My question is number one, if a new facility is approved and does start to move forward, how long does it take to get that new facility up and have opening day? And what are we going to do with the current COA in the state that it's in? Secondly, if it doesn't pass, what are we going to do about the current COA in the state that it's in? And I guess thirdly, really, is when the CFAL does get opened as a new one, what do we really have as a perspective of cost and budget for infrastructure of these facilities? Because COA is a lot different than anything else, different than education, different than schools. Healthcare that's administered, food services, the services that seniors and elderly folks need changes over the years, and also the expense of the equipment sometimes has to be replaced in a matter of 2 to 3 years or 5-year lifespans. Technology takes over, and all that is part of that infrastructure, which she reflected as being one of the difficulties and the struggles they're having. So I just want to warn people that whichever side you're on these issues, we have allowed our COA to be quite limited, and obviously we have to share services for daycare and others with Orleans or Brewster, I understand. And I just want to make sure that we are looking at it with 2 years back, 2 years forward. I like that look. That's a great way. What's happened in the last 2 years? What's forward for 2 years? And are we putting that visual perspective in our decision making and also in our proposals for these new facilities?
Thank you. Jill, who would be best to address those questions?
I can start and certainly have someone fill in. So thank you for your questions, and I think those are great questions that we'll address at our public information session coming up on August 22nd. So the timeline, depending on the approval at the September 18th special town meeting, typically a project will take about anywhere between 24 months, a little longer. The plan would be, if it's approved, to move immediately over to try to get the project out, final design, and get it bid in January. And then moving from there would be a timeline that I could present, based on that. We'll have that information for the special town meeting. But as it relates to the existing COA, or Center for Active Living at Stony Hill, it isn't a matter of it falling into disrepair. I think it was built or acquired in 1985. It was a residential building that was converted. And what we found during COVID and the various HVAC requirements is that the HVAC system wasn't sufficient to allow us to use the full facility, even after COVID. So if you go in there, you have the opportunity. There's been some upkeep and new floors and so forth, but we know that there's some structural issues that we have to deal with. And because it's been presented for a few years now as a potential project for replacement, it's not that we've delayed some of the items. We've done everything that's needed for the day-to-day, but there's some functions such as the foundation, the elevator, as you had mentioned, that does require an upgrade. So this building, for instance, came online in 2011. We're working on some replacement items that are needed for this building, as well as even for the fire station. It goes by very quickly. It's more than 11 years or 12 years, but we do have a facilities management plan that we're working on that's going to target each building. It's actually a requirement of our charter to present that, and that's due in 2026. Any specific questions, I'm happy to address offline or directly, or if the committee wants, I can pass it on for the project timeline to either Leah Lacrosse or Terry Whalen. But I think all of this will be discussed at our upcoming community forum.
Great, thank you. Okay, we'll conclude the meeting. Thank you for your attendance. Thank you for being active listeners. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.